Today's lecture is going to be a bit unusual because it is about home. It is about the place where we live now. It is about the extraordinary natural resources that are here in Athens, Clarke County. It is about the places that we in this room rarely think about when we go about our daily business to and from this university or any of the employment that we have in Athens, Clarke County. But by the end of this lecture, you are going to understand that we live in an extraordinary place and time. The great biologist E.O. Wilson has talked about biodiversity trends globally. And these are the sobering facts that he produces. He suggests that in 10 years, 5% of all the living plant and animal species on this planet will be gone. Within 25 years, 10% gone. Within 75 years, 1/4 of every living species on this planet will be gone. So that is within the lifetime of many of the students in this room. In order to counteract this, what E.O. Wilson has suggested in the New York Times recently, that we engage massively in the protection of land, protection of the habitats in which these species live. And he has set as 25% of the Earth's surface the goal for setting aside to be in preservation. So how is the state of Georgia doing? The state of Georgia is not doing terribly well. We're at 7.8% are involved in, there is preservation and protection for 7.8% of our land mass. Not bad, but still not enough. But this is what the state of Georgia would look like if we achieved Wilson's 25%. That would require a lot of people to be displaced, but what it would do, it would preserve the libraries of information that are contained in the genetics of all the species that we would protect. And Georgia is, as 6th in the country in terms of its biodiversity, one of the states where this kind of protection is especially important. Now, how are we doing in Athens, Clarke County? We're about 5%, but in 2012, something extraordinary happened. The Athens, Clarke County purchased the Tallahassee Forest area, and that was announced with great fanfare in the Athens Banner Herald. That was a major land acquisition, almost 310 acres here in the northwest part of the county, and it's set aside in these forests. Now, Tallahassee Tract is fairly close to where Karen and I live, and I want to begin to explore with you what we have begun to explore in Tallahassee since 2012 and the purchase. Tallahassee Tract goes all the way from Tallahassee Road here. That's the parking lot for Bernie Harris Lyons School up there, that's Tallahassee. It stretches out in this area and then it opens up into this region here along the Oconee River that you see at the bottom. Let's focus for right now mostly on this central area that is just above the Oconee River. The image that you're seeing now was a Landsat photograph taken in 2013 of this area. And Andrew Saunders, who is part of the Environmental Services Division of Athens, Clarke County, decided that he would do a study looking at prior assessments and images of this area. And the first one he found was from 1938, the USDA agricultural flyover. And here it is, he has georeferenced these to show the exact same area. And the first thing that came out of that is, oh my heavens, there are mature forests on this land already. Now it's true some of it was at the time farmed, but this mature forest did exist. And so what I'm going to do now is to lay this back over onto the 2013 images, this time in green, emphasizing the presence of these old forested areas, which he calls legacy forests, and they are green. For legacy forests, the definition is that a legacy forest is any forest that is older than 50 years. And at present, 75% of the Tallahassee Tract is covered by legacy forests. However, even more interestingly, 50% of this acquisition is covered by forests that we know from the 1938 aerial survey are older than 75 years. But it's more interesting than even that, because in the 1938 survey, many of the trees that could be imaged are themselves more than 75 years old, which means that it is possible that right here in Athens-Clarke County, we have forests that are at least 150 years old and possibly even older. It has been thought that there are no primary forests in the state of Georgia except up in Rabun County, ones that had not been timbered or lumbered. But that is a question that should be asked now for the first time right here in the middle of the Piedmont in Athens-Clarke County. But regardless of whether they had ever been lumbered or not, we still have extremely old forest land right here in Athens-Clarke. Now, there are implications to this, and those implications don't stop. One is that the Department of Natural Resources has identified habitats of critical concern, high priority they're called, and Andrew mapped all of these across Tallahassee Forest. So a large number of DNR's high priority habitats, which are disappearing from the Piedmont, are found right here in Athens-Clarke County. And these are the same habitats which the State Botanical Garden and the University of Georgia published on in a recent book by Edwards, Ambrose, and K. Kirkman with these photographs. And this is a very recent book in which they documented these. So let's look at more of the specifics here. Of the 16 Georgia DNR high priority habitats which are disappearing from the Piedmont, Tallahassee Forest has 9 of them. Already 9 of these are right here in Athens-Clarke County. Tallahassee Forest has 310 acres total, of which 200, that's 65%, are engaged in these high priority habitats. A very high concentration of these extremely rare and endangered habitats from the Piedmont area. Tallahassee Forest is a conservation gem. As we have begun to study more and more what the county and you, the taxpayers of Athens-Clarke County, have done, the more extraordinary it proves to have been. I've been collecting there, and it's an amazing place for butterflies. On the left is the purple hair streak. We've not seen it anywhere else. The Henry's elfin, definitely not anywhere else. The green hair streak here, and the cobweb skipper, which I'll say a little bit more about. We also have the only record that I have for the goatweed is there, and the wood nymph as well. And the only time I've seen the dog-faced sulfur in Athens-Clarke County was in fact out there. One of the things that was so much fun about the University of Georgia's having purchased UGA Costa Rica is that they had to send teachers down to teach there. Out into the rainforest they went, and back and back and back with the most amazing butterflies they came. And after that, we had them do scholarship. This was not an easy exercise to put a Latin name on a butterfly. It was not easy at all. And there's one very good reason why that was such a difficult task in Costa Rica. It is because of the phenomenon known as sibling species. These are the ones that are look-alike. In the tropics, sibling species are de rigueur. This is what you expect to find. All 3 of these, this one, and this one, those are different species. And here the same thing, different species, the top one, the middle one, and the bottom. These are so difficult to tell apart that you can't tell them apart even if it's right in front of your nose. But let's look more closely at that example of sibling species. Sibling species, the hallmark of the tropical environment. So, little was I prepared to understand what we had found on the Tallahassee Tract. We were collecting these pearly-eye butterflies, and I was making a collection, and I was calling them all the southern pearly-eye. That was certainly what you would expect. But as I began to look more closely, this began to become really different. Now, I'm going to show you here the specimens from Athens, Clarke County, and again, I will also pass these around. All of the butterflies that you see in this frame are from the Tallahassee Tract. We have on the left the upper side, and on the right the underside of each of these species. And their names are to the left. So if we look a little closer, we begin to understand something about those changes. So let's try to see how to tell these things apart. Let's start by counting the dots on the wing, and try that when they're flying past you. All right. 1, 2, 3. We're expanding them from top to bottom. First, we're going to look at the northern pearly-eye. Okay, here it goes. 1, 2, 3, 4 spots. Now, that's the northern pearly-eye described in 1936. Here we have the next one, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's different. That was the Creole pearly-eye described in 1897. And now look at the bottom one. Here we go. We have, for those spots, we have 1, 2, 3, 4.5. Well, that's all you get, folks. There it is. Now, I would also contend that those differences that you were able to see in the Costa Rican sibling species complex are even more cryptic in these specimens here. And I would also point out that despite all the intense interest in North American butterfly species, it took them 150 years to realize these things wouldn't breed true. There it is, 150 years between those descriptions. Now, it turns out there is one other identifying characteristic, which again, you need to watch as they fly by you, and that is the antenna. So, here we go. For the northern pearly-eye, we've got yellow, black, and then kind of yellowish there. And for the Creole, it's yellow, black, and nothing. And then for the southern pearly-eye, it's yellow all the way down. That's another way to tell them apart. That's how cryptic these things are. And that's the southern pearly-eye. Now, we are back to John Abbott. In 1791, Abbott painted this of the pearly-eyes that he had been able to collect. My suspicion is that Fabricius's specimen may actually have come from Abbott. I'm not sure about that. But it's interesting that in his drawing, he decided that he was not going to draw just one butterfly, although he labeled it southern pearly-eye. I will draw your attention to these two butterflies very carefully. If you look at them, what you see is that this one looks like the Creole, and this one looks like the southern pearly-eye. And in fact, these features that he clearly included in his watercolor, and incidentally, this watercolor is outside in the displays, clearly shows that he understood the important morphological differences between these two species. And here for the southern pearly-eye, once again, as reflected in the extraordinary art of this natural historian and acute observer of the natural world. Now, let's look at the distribution of pearly-eyes across North America. These are the northern pearly-eye distribution records that you see here. For the Creole pearly-eye, it's farther south, not much in Florida, but notice then for the southern pearly-eye, it really is all the way to the bottom. Okay, so what I've done here was to go through taxonomic records for butterflies collected in the state of Georgia from at least 4 different databases around the nation: the Smithsonian, the Georgia Museum of Natural History, and our own collections. And what I'm going to do is show you the counties in the state of Georgia where, over the period of 40 years, all 3 species have been found. These include Rabun County in the north, Floyd, Barrow County, Rockdale County, and Twiggs County in the south of Georgia, and now Athens, Clarke County as well. However, what I'm going to do, and these are from records from the Georgia Museum of Natural History as well as my own collection, what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the check marks from all of the counties where they were never found in the same year. And when you do that, you take away, you look for the data, and you take away then Rabun County, Floyd County, Barrow County, Rockdale County, Twiggs County. Only Athens, Clarke County were they ever found in the same place and at the same time. And this is an amazing thing because we have seen them, all 3 species in Tallahassee Forest, at the same time and in the same place within visual sight of where they were collected. So if we look closely at Athens, Clarke County, we can see there it is, Tallahassee Tract, and there we have it, 1, 2, 3, the only place in the world outside the tropics where you have 3 sibling species in the same place and at the same time. Now, we're scientists here, so let's express this as a hypothesis. The working hypothesis that I'm presenting to you today is that Athens, Clarke County is the only place in the world outside the tropics with this kind of a sibling species complex. That is 3 indistinguishable species on the wing at the same time and in the same place. There are many other places outside the tropics where you have 2 sibling species on the wing at the same time in the same place, but never 3. And what I can say is that I have tried to test this hypothesis with more than 100 hours of careful scholarship, and I have been unable to falsify this hypothesis. Now, it is possible that someone will be able to falsify it and find someplace else. My suspicion is probably not. And we have in Athens, Clarke County a unique ecological process which is never found anywhere else in the world. Now let's look a little bit more about these pearly eye butterflies. First, the habitat for all 3 species is the same. It's lowland moist forest, and that fits Tallahassee to a T. The behavior is that all 3 of these species sit on oak trees overlooking these moist meadows, and they all sit upside down. There's no difference at all between them. And the males sit on the trees and they fly out to find females. And here's the other amazing thing. They all have the same preferred plant, which is river cane arundinaria that you see here. Now, in the tropics, when you find a sibling species complex, invariably most of those species are feeding on different things. But here, for these 3 species, they're all feeding on the same thing, river cane. The one exception to this is not here in Georgia, but this is the distribution for arundinaria around the southeast. And the northern pearly eye does get farther north, and when it does not have arundinaria to feed on, it will feed on some other kinds of river grasses. But in Athens, Clarke County in the southeast, it, like the others, is a river cane specialist. And we know this too, again, from the University of Georgia Museum here, where the specimens of the pearly eye that had been bred by Jim Maudsley were in the collection, and Jim did the wonderful thing of including the species of plant that he had reared these butterflies on. And there it is, arundinaria. Arundinaria looms large in the history of our state. William Bartram came to Athens, Clarke County in 1771, and he wrote the following. Our route was to the lowlands on the Oconee. I accompanied the hunting party to the banks of this beautiful river. The cane swamps of immense extent are incredibly fertile. This was something that is part of Athens, Clarke County. We are a center for these kinds of river cane. Now I'll tell a story also that Dorset Trapnell shared with me about Mike Moore, who took his botanical class to the river bottom area of the Oconee, out onto the floodplain, and a student looked at this river cane and said, "What's that?" And Mike said, "It's Arundinaria donax." And at the end of the trip, Mike could see that the students were a little disconsolate, this one was, and he said, "Well, what's wrong?" And the student looked at him and said, "I asked you what that plant was, and you said, I don't know, donax." Okay, so where is Arundinaria found right now? These maps, again provided by Athens, Clarke County, show the distribution of Arundinaria. I think Karen was involved in some of these surveys as well. And what I want to do is to superimpose over this now that 1938 aerial USDA. What you see is this in green is the modern 2016 distribution of Arundinaria. And these are the old farmed fields. And what you can see is that the current modern distribution of Arundinaria is vastly truncated from what William Bartram said was probably out there, and yet it conforms to the old field of the 1938 photograph. And what this means is that even after 80 years, historical patterns of land use are still controlling the distribution and abundance of this critical habitat in Athens, Clarke County. What we do to the land now matters in the future. River cane is highly conservation dependent. We need to remove privet from the river cane habitats. We need to reintroduce fire, probably under controlled conditions. And we need to maintain open canopies. And I'm making these as specific recommendations for how Tallahassee Forest is treated in the future. I also want to draw your attention to this one here, which is another Arundinaria obligate. This is the lacewing skipper that I mentioned before. It will not be in Athens, Clarke County if we do not protect Arundinaria river cane. Each of us in this room has a responsibility, not just at the global level, but at the local level, to support the kinds of conservation efforts that have successfully produced this extraordinary place called Tallahassee Forest. Conclusions that we can reach from this analysis of home. Tallahassee Forest includes 9 of the DNR's 16 high priority habitats. The high priority habitats cover 65% of its 314 acres. It has a potentially unique ecological phenomenon of sibling species in the North Temperate on its premises. Tallahassee Forest demonstrates spectacular example of local conservation, the kinds of things that E.O. Wilson is calling to the world to do. It is an excellent use of taxpayer SPLOST funding. And it is an extraordinary synergism between Athens, Clarke County, the University of Georgia, and NGOs and land trusts across the state. That's the partnership that worked. Tallahassee Forest reminds us of the importance of historical patterns of land use and our need to redouble our efforts to preserve our natural heritage, to conserve our natural resources. And the real hero of all of this is this interaction between these different organizations that have all put in time, sweat, labor, and occasionally tears to make it happen. Oconee River Land Trust, Athens Clarke County Leisure Services, Oconee Rivers Greenway Commission, Audubon Society, State Botanical Garden, Georgia River Network, Odom School, UON's Athens Land Trust and Museum of Natural History, and the Department of Natural Resources. This is how conservation will be done in the future. We have done it here in Athens, Clarke County. And we have achieved something of amazing proportion that may be of global importance. I thank you very much for coming today.